Good evening, my friends. This is the Grim Flayer, and I hope you're doing very well tonight. Welcome to another spoiler video. This one is for Ragavan, Nimble Pilferer, and that's a mouthful of a name, and I'll tell you what, it's also a mouthful of a text box, especially for a one-drop. Will he Jund is the question here, and I have to say, I think he will. This card is obscenely powerful. It really has so much going for it. It is unbelievable. So we've basically, if you want to look at an overview that how I would describe the card without actually telling you what it does, I would say that it's aggressive. It turns sideways. It rewards you for being aggressive, for clearing the way, for putting pressure on your opponent. This is something Jund wants to do. It also accrues value in a couple of different ways repeatedly over the course of a game if uncontested, and gives you an enormous amount of tactical flexibility, including borrowing tech from your opponent. So all of these things, if you put them together as a big, kind of philosophical whole, they're very, very Jundy, and I think the card quality is very high. Also, the opportunity cost of playing a one-drop, relatively low. You don't have to wait till turn 4 to start going off. You can play this turn 1 and start taking it from there. So for all of those reasons, I'm pretty high on Ragavan, but I will warn you, you cannot just slot this into a regular old Jund list and expect success. We've got to build around it. So I'm going to talk here about my ideas as it relates to the card, give you some food for thought here. We've got the Ragavan normal art. He's looking very pleased with himself. Sitting near the prow of a ship, surrounded by his treasures. You'll love to see it. Very proud monkey. And then we've got a cool full art printing where he's looking more inquisitive, right? He's kind of trying to figure out the ins and outs of the trinkets that he's acquired. So we're very proud of Ragavan. Very likable character. The monkey pirate himself. And I think he's going to Jund. So let's get into it. Thank you very much for watching. Let's talk about Ragavan. Ragavan, Nimble Pilferer is a red 1-drop 2/1 legendary monkey pirate. Whenever Ragavan Nimble Pilferer deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token and exile the top card of that player's library. Until end of turn, you may cast that card. Ragavan also has a dash ability for 1 gray and 1 red. That is a lot of text, guys, like I said, and this is some very, very powerful text. So first of all, the floor of a 1-mana 2/1 is really not that bad. It's never going to be rotting in hand. You can even cast it under Blood Moon. If they turn 1 Blood Moon you still go Ragavan. Not that turn 1 Blood Moon's even a thing in Modern anymore, right? And it's a 2/1, If it's a game where you're just kind of turning creatures sideways and maybe casting discard spells, that 2/1 for 1's not bad. If your opponent's on Goblin Guide, you can block a Goblin Guide. It's really not that bad. The floor is very, very reasonable, but the ceiling is extremely high. And the ceiling is high because of this text. So let's break down this big old text box. So the first part, whenever Ragavan deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token, but we're going to stop before the end. A treasure token. Tap, sack it, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. And this is another form of ramp, my friends. And ramp, I covered with Ignoble Hierarch, is something that Jund can really, really benefit from. If you haven't seen my Ignoble Hierarch video, go check that out if you're not convinced by just what I said here. The big problem with ramp is that historically our options in ramp, at least since Deathrite Shaman got banned, have not been value positive or high card quality enough to justify how bad they can be as top decks. I think Ignoble Hierarch is probably good enough to kind of overcome the limitations of a Mana Dork due to that exalted ability and due to perfect fixing. But if we think Ignoble Hierarch is good enough in that regard, Ragavan is insane, because Ragavan's floor is much higher as just a useful body, and also it's got much more tactical flexibility. So the fact that ramp is not traditionally what Jund does, do not let that dissuade you. We need to think differently here, and ramp is absolutely a very, very powerful thing that we have access to, especially because you can ramp repeatedly. You can ramp for 1 mana per turn as long as he keeps connecting. Treasure token also, just like Ignoble Hierarch, is fixing. In fact, it's even better fixing than the Jund colors. Not that you will usually need other colors, but every now and then you will. So you create a treasure token upon connecting with Ragavan. and you exile the top card of that player's library. Until end of turn, you may cast that card. And now, all of a sudden, with our 1 mana 2/1, our aggressively costed body, we're damaging the opponent, we're ramping, and we are hopefully casting a spell from the opponent's library. So every time Ragavan connects, if you find a spell that is live, it is a 2-for-0 effect. That is insane. That is completely and utterly insane. So obviously, if you're finding spells that are very castable, let's just pick the obvious one. You flip over a lightning bolt, you cast the lightning bolt. The treasure pays for the lightning bolt. So you cast a free card without any mana investment, and it was something very proactive that either killed an opposing creature or advanced your clock. And while you're at it, it took away a useful card from the opponent, and it grows your Tarmogoyf if you've got a Tarmogoyf coming down to back Ragman up, right? But it goes on. So obviously that's kind of the ideal ceiling, right? Is that Ragavan's continuing to hit, and he's just finding you gas off the opponent's deck, and it's insult to injury, and it's beautiful, right? But even if Ragavan flips over something uncastable, it can actually still be useful. Every now and then you will kind of dumb luck your way into exiling the opponent's perfect top deck, or into exiling their combo win condition, or indeed to exiling a land that they need. Whatever the case may be, that is actually something that will happen occasionally with no setup. Now remember that Scry is an ability that does exist in Modern, and Ragavan can waylay the opponent's scrying plans with this on-hit triggered ability, because you will just exile whatever they wanted, whatever they spent their last turn putting on the top. So that is what I mean, my friends, by tactical flexibility. Now, if you want to talk even more about tactical flexibility, what about his second ability, Dash? Well, Dash is I refer you to my old kitchen table favorite, Lightning Berserker, probably the dash card I've casted the most in my life. Dash reads, you may cast a spell for its dash cost. If you do, it gains haste in its return from the battlefield to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step, and that is also another form of tactical flexibility. Why? Well, Ragavan is a 2/1, and I can already hear the objections that it dies to Lava Dart, and it dies to this, and it dies to that. One of the things that it dies to is a Renin 6 ping. So against a known or suspected Renin 6, you can instead dash Ragavan out, thereby evading sorcery speed removal, and that includes spot removal, but it also includes Planeswalker ping effects. This includes sweeper effects as well. So that's another really nice use case of dash as far as tactical flexibility goes. But that's not even why dash is the most that's not even the way, I should say, in which dash is the most powerful. The way dash is the most powerful here with Ragavan is that it makes him into a really decent mid to late game top deck. Hopefully by now I've established that he's pretty darn good in a lot of different ways early game for Jund. But the big problem with these 1-drops is often they are pretty bad late game. We talked about Ignoble Hierarch. He has his uses, an extra body to protect against edict effects from your real threats. Obviously Exalted is a really live ability. I don't want to undersell him because I do think he Junds, but Ragavan is better. Ragavan is better off the top almost all of the time in the mid to late game, because not only is he a bigger body by himself, but you just dash him on turn 7 on an empty board after a ton of attrition, and not only are you starting to connect again with a hasty threat, you are potentially getting a spell out of the opponent's deck to use, and then suddenly your opponent is the one playing off the top, scrambling for answers. So that's kind of the breakdown, my friends, of Ragavan's stat line and all of his abilities, and I hope you can see just how powerful this little guy can be. So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about some use cases and some synergies and some ways that he's an out to unforeseen foes. So I think Ragavan is good enough to see play in a lot of shells, so why would he Jund specifically? Well, Jund is a really good set of colors for casting a wide net in terms of Ragavan's on-damage triggered ability. in terms of number one, being able to cast as many spells as possible. Because note that Ragavan's ability does not read you may spend mana as though or mana of any color to cast these spells that you find. So your treasures can help you to some degree, but they're not perfect mana fixing. You only make one per turn. You can't necessarily save them for subsequent fixing. Sometimes you just need them for the mana production in general, right? So the fact that Jund is red, black, and green means that you are covering 60% of your bases, more when you count artifacts, right? But at least 60% of your bases overall in the meta, and a disproportionately proactive amount of the bases. I already used Lightning Bolt as an example. We'll use Inquisition of Kozilek as another example. You're against a black deck, it's early on, you connect with Ragavan, you flip an Inquisition, perfect. Use your treasure, cast it, progress your Jund game plan, do your Jund thing. Now Ragavan could also see play and be great in like a blue-red tempo shell, and I'm not saying it's wrong to play a Ragavan, but consider the upside of having blue in your deck against an opposing blue deck, right? And then your Ragavan connects and you flip a counter spell. Well, that's not a proactive thing to do, so that card's just going to go to waste. And, you know, your opponent's not going to play into it, it's just going to go into exile, whatever. So I hope that illustrates the fact that being in the Jund colors, being able to cast disproportionately proactive spells, is just a slight upside that he would have in Jund as opposed to maybe other more tempo-oriented or reactive shells. Speaking of reasons to play Ragavan and Jund, just like with Ignoble Hierarch, we can power out turn 2 Lily of the Veil. Now we'll actually do that a little more consistently with Ignoble, because all Ignoble has to do is live, whereas Ragavan has to live and connect. Nevertheless, the prospect of T2 Lily is not to be underestimated. She's not always the perfect T2 play, but she will be lights out a lot of the time. She will be very powerful a lot of the rest of the time, right? And again, not a panacea, not a hard lock piece, not an unbeatable hate card or anything like that, but still very, very powerful, and still very much, I think, a part of what Jund wants to be doing. Now, I've compared Ragavan to Ignoble Hierarch a lot so far in this video, but I don't think it has to be one or the other. Now, if we're going down that territory, it really kind of necessitates a reimagining of Jund, and I think that's okay. I think we're getting some signals to want to lower our curve drastically with some of these new printings, and we're not going down to like only dorks all the time or anything like that, but my point here is I don't think you have to choose between Ignoble Hierarch and Ragavan, and in fact, Ignoble Hierarch's Exalted ability, in conjunction with Ragavan, whether he's sticking on the field or whether you're dashing him in, that's actually beneficial. It actually makes him a safer and more effective attacker, so don't sleep on that little bromance between Ignoble Hierarch and Ragavan. Definitely some promising things there, but if we are looking to lower our curve, looking to play these really impactful one-drops that are fragile to removal, of course we have to consider Lurrus of the Dream Den as kind of the companion, or maybe just the top end in general, a 2 to 3 main deck Lurrus, something like that. That could definitely allow for some real resiliency in the context of this deck. And you can also, if you're on Lurrus, you're going to be on Bauble. You can even Bauble the opponent to see whether it's worth risking the Ragavan attack, if it's like a really dicey attack, or you're not sure whether, you know, who's the beatdown, who's the control, right? It's just a very minor thing, but some interesting thoughts there. And this is actually just occurring to me. But I think you can actually dash Ragavan out of the graveyard when cast with Lurrus. I haven't looked it up, just occurred to me, but I think that's probably how that works. Another really cool thing. Now, talking about new cards, how about Turok Dread Cantor? I think a lot of people were a little bit lower on this guy when he came out, because we hadn't seen Ignoble Hierarch yet, and we also hadn't seen Ragavan yet, so the decks that play Turok have no modern quality ramp cards, but now we do. And the prospect of Turok on turn 3 instead of turn 4 when kicked makes absolutely all the difference. So imagine powering this guy out on T3 to him your opponent, leave behind a 4-3 pro-white body that can scale into the late game, all the while you are accruing ramp and card advantage with Ragavan. You're basically drowning them in card advantage, severe depletion, and severe value generation, all while putting down a pretty decent clock. You know, these cards do have some pretty good synergies, my friends. Another thing I would like to say about Ragavan in the positive light is that he is a good card under Blood Moon, and Blood Moon can really get us on Jund sometimes despite our best efforts. Now, Ragavan is good under Blood Moon, obviously, because he is red, and therefore can be cast under Moon no problem, but also remember, he is creating treasure. If the coast is clear, you can even dash him in to immediately secure a treasure token and therefore start getting your colors back online, even if you are totally mooned out. The final and most perhaps unexpected synergy card with Ragavan is Dark Confidant. Now we're talking about all this brand new technology, and Bob himself had already mostly been squeezed, but not completely, squeezed out of Jund prior to MH2, right? So is there really any room for Bob in this brave new post-MH2 world? Isn't he more of like a rock card these days? Maybe. But if we are trending toward that low curve, toward Lurrus, and toward a lot of one-drops that are really impactful, Dark Confidant gets a lot better. Of course, he's going to be flipping a lot less painlessly. That is very significant in a painfully mana-based deck like Jund. And also, Dark Confidant is drawing you multiple spells per turn a lot of the time, and so therefore the ramp from Ignoble Hierarch and or Ragavan can be put to really good use with an uncontested Bob. Now this does put us to the point where we're playing a lot of smaller creatures. I understand that. This might not be the perfect fit altogether, just another card that I did think had a little bit of legs alongside some of the new cards we're discussing, but as always it remains to be seen. One thing I will say is that the news keeps getting worse and worse for Bloodbraid Elf with some of these printings. I don't think she's particularly good alongside Ragavan, or alongside Ignoble Hierarch, or alongside Turok Dread Cantor. If we're talking about these cards all playing well together, Bloodbraid is kind of the odd one out. I've talked about this in the Ignoble Hierarch video. I won't relitigate it here. And I think that's okay, because I think we have so many other ways to construct our top end, and I also think there will still be a role for a more Boomer Jund build, which, by the way, I have been very high on since Companion has got nerfed. What is it, about a year ago now? Where are we with Lurrus? There he is. There she is. So, I have never, since Companion got nerfed, said, Bloodbraid Elf in the Jund top end is not good enough, we need to go to Lurrus. I've never really said that. I've dabbled with it, I think it's like okay, but I've always actually been a Bloodbraid Elf respecter and a Boomer Jund respecter. But now with these really impactful one-drops, I think Bloodbraid Elf is starting to look a lot sketchier, because she's got some bad cascade hits, she's a more high variance top end. I think we might be able to do better if these cards Jund, as I think they will. And you know what? We might get a little bit of percentage points, just incidentally, by moving away from Bloodbraid Elf, because if the leak is to be believed, and basically everything else from the leak has already come true, so I think it is, Shardless Agent will be entering Modern, although it has not yet been confirmed at the time of this recording. I think Shardless Agent will see a lot of play, and I myself, by the way, plan to play it with Profane Tutor in a kind of bug, shardless, tutory, mid-rangey shell. I think that could be really fun and reasonably powerful. But the point here is that if Shardless Agent is yet another Cascade spell entering Modern, you will see people hating out Cascade, with Void Mirror, with Teferi Time Raveler, with all kinds of other stuff, whatever else, their deck leverages the best. Therefore, it might not hurt to cheat away from Bloodbraid Elf a little bit, just save us that headache. So there you go, friends. Those are my thoughts on Ragavan Nimble Pilferer. The card is a very high card quality, very low opportunity cost, high floor, high ceiling, tactically flexible card that fits strategically with the Jund game plan in some pretty proven ways, and then also in the new kind of new look Jund that might be opting for some ramp as well. So in the old way, and in what I think will be the new way, card Juns. The card Juns, it's just a matter of finding the best synergies, the best shell. And I think in general, we'll be seeing a lot of this guy in a lot of different formats. Very powerful one, if you ask me, but I could be wrong. If you think I'm wrong, let me know why in the comments below. If you think I'm right, leave your messages of agreement or support in the comments below, or indeed elaborate upon the arguments that I made here. I'd love to hear it all. We got to figure out what to do with Ragavan before everybody else does, right? So leave your hot takes as always, and I will talk to you for the next spoiler video. Thank you for watching. Have a great night.